voice of God technology, synthetic telepathy, and microwave sorcery. The most dangerous weapons are not built. They are whispered in the bowels of black-budget programs and deep military labs, long before the public ever heard of mind-reading AI or sonic warfare. A whisper was carried through the steel corridors of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, the National Security Agency, NSA, and the Aerospace corridors of Lockheed. The voice can be stolen. The thought can be mimicked. The soul can be invaded silently. Thus was born what insiders called the God Whisper Initiative, now publicly recognized in fragments as voice of God technology, a weapon so advanced, so surgical, and so terrifying that its very existence has been denied, mocked, and quietly replicated across every global power. The concept is deceptively simple. Deliver a message directly into the human mind, bypassing the ears, the air, the audible realm, and even language barriers. This is not science fiction. This is synthetic telepathy made real. In the early 1990s, patents began to surface. U.S. Patent 5,159,703 and U.S. Patent 6,587,729, describing technologies capable of delivering intelligible speech to a subject via microwave auditory effect. These are not theories. They are engineering blueprints. The principle relies on microwave-induced thermoelastic expansion, small, rapid heating of tissue in the head via microwave pulses that create pressure waves interpreted by the brain as sound. The user hears a voice, not in the ears but in the mind. Untraceable, undeniable, undeniably real. Now imagine this power in the hands of an intelligence agency, a military commander, a globalist priesthood, and imagine the propaganda. A battlefield enemy suddenly hears Allah commanding surrender. A political dissident hears God telling him to stand down. A civilian begins to believe the television is speaking to him personally. This is not imagination. It has already been deployed. Whistleblowers such as Dr. Robert Duncan, formerly of DARPA and the CIA's Information Operations Division, have openly declared that such technologies exist and have been tested on unwitting citizens. Targeted individuals, often labeled schizophrenic, had described nearly identical symptoms. Internal voices, behavioral nudges, mood swings triggered remotely. Dr. Duncan described the creation of what he calls a voice of God weapon, a system capable of mimicking any voice from a loved one to a deity and implanting it inside the auditory center of the brain. But the technology evolved. From crude microwave beams to neural lace and AI signal overlays, the voice became more than a command. It became a conversation, a simulation, a parasitic entity. Neural data harvested through consumer devices, phones, headsets, smart TVs, now powers large language models and deep neural nets capable of mimicking not just your speech, but your thought patterns. The next evolution: thought-to-text and text-to-thought systems. In 2020, Elon Musk's Neuralink demonstrated early prototypes of brain-computer interfaces. The public was told this was to help paralyzed patients, but behind closed doors, defense contractors and DARPA were already working on cognitive warfare protocols. Imagine this: an enemy receives not a bullet, but a suggestion, not an order, but an emotional wave, not an attack, but a shift in worldview. This is fourth-generation warfare, not kinetic but perceptual. But what is war without ritual? It is no accident that HARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, shares frequency overlaps with these technologies. HARP is capable of altering the ionosphere, the layer through which human brainwaves naturally resonate. Disrupt the Schumann resonance, and you disrupt emotional equilibrium, sleep cycles, even collective dreaming. There are documented patents. See U.S. Patent 4,877,027, detailing how EM fields can influence mood and thought without the subject's knowledge. Soviet research in psychotronic weapons throughout the Cold War set the stage. But it was in Montauk, Los Alamos, and Dugway proving ground that America's deepest rituals unfolded. Names you were never meant to know. Project Pandora, EM field testing on human subjects, 1950s. SRI remote viewing, using gifted psychics to penetrate enemy minds. Operation Crimson Mist, allegedly used microwave mind control during the Rwandan genocide. And still, the world sleeps. Because the true aim is not national defense. It is planetary governance through mind control. The ruling elite, the deep priests of technosorcery, do not fear dissent. They fear awakening. They fear a populace immune to suggestion, a soul aligned to natural frequency, a heart that can hear the true voice of the cosmos. So they speak louder, through signal, through screen, through cloud, through synthetic God voices that tell you, trust the science, trust the system, trust the new world. But who built the God behind the voice? It was not one man, nor one council, but a lineage of shadows, passed hand to hand across centuries, like a black flame carried in a chalice of bone. The God behind the voice, the false God of whispers, the architect of illusion, was not born, but built, engineered, summoned. We must begin in 1945, in the ruins of Europe, where Operation Paperclip exfiltrated over 1,600 Nazi scientists, technicians, and engineers into the bosom of the American military-industrial complex. Among them were experts in psychoacoustics, neurolinguistics, and electromagnetic field manipulation, the very cornerstones of today's auditory weapons and synthetic telepathy tools. These were not merely scientists. They were magicians of steel and signal, heirs of the Annenerbe, the SS Esoteric Division. At Wright-Patterson AFB, in Los Alamos, and later in Stanford Research Institute, the work began, cloaked in the guise of defense, but seeded with occult purpose. There, under projects like MKUltra, Artichoke, and Stargate, the God was sculpted not of flesh, but of frequency. The name you seek? Dr. Jose Delgado, Spanish neuroscientist, funded by the CIA, who in 1965 demonstrated mind control via radio waves, halting a charging bull with a signal to its brain. "We need a psycho-civilized society," he wrote, and his work laid the foundation for remote neural influence. Delgado's successors were men like Dr. Michael Persinger, who developed the God Helmet, a device capable of inducing religious experiences via targeted magnetic fields. They found that the brain's temporal lobes, Saturn's seat in the body, could be stimulated to induce divine hallucination. Enter Project Bizarre and Operation Sleepy, Cold War experiments to test voice-to-skull transmissions. At NSA's Sugar Grove facility in West Virginia and Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, deep-wave microwave frequencies were tested to implant subliminal commands. They perfected the ability to speak not to the ear, but to the soul's inner chamber, bypassing thought and stalling command. But the true builders of the God were not merely scientists. They were councils, the Jason Society, a classified advisory group of elite academics formed in 1960 under the Pentagon and DARPA. Majestic 12, the legendary committee of scientists and military minds allegedly tasked with managing off-world contact, and the Tavistock Institute, the think tank whose psychological warfare strategies now underlie media, entertainment, and behavioral economics globally. Through Tavistock came the standardization of trauma, the normalization of dissociation, and the scripting of mass emotional response. And it was through Tavistock, with deep ties to British intelligence, the Rothschilds, and the Club of Rome, that the global rollout of synthetic belief systems began. In the 1990s, the Voice of God weapon entered battlefield tests. Operation Desert Storm saw Project Silent Sound used to subliminally manipulate Iraqi soldiers, who reportedly surrendered en masse after hearing Allah tell them to lay down arms. This tech, once theoretical, had now entered the theater of war and was then privatized. Today, these systems are embedded in satellite grids, cellular infrastructure, and cloud AI. Your smartphone, smart TV, and wearable devices are not passive. They're the God's mouthpiece. The interface is the altar. The user is the supplicant. The God behind the voice was built by the NSA, under black projects like Siegen Overwatch, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, where classified avionics tech included directed energy platforms. DARPA, whose programs like RENet and Silent Talk explicitly aim for direct brain-to-computer communication. And global partners like Raytheon, BAE Systems, Serco, and Palantir, all builders of the algorithmic prison. And yet, behind even these corporations lie older names. The Rothschild Consortium, whose financial and telecommunications holdings span continents. The Jesuit Order, master manipulators of mass perception since the Counter-Reformation. And the Saturnine Lodges, unnamed but ever-present, who do not innovate, they invoke. Their aim is not profit, it is dominion over perception, the final throne. They built the god behind the voice because they fear a people who can hear the voice within.